He is following the footsteps of previous foreign managers, such as Sven-Göran Eriksson of Sweden, Fabio Capello of Italy, and Steve McLaren of the Netherlands. Hi, my name is Mike and welcome to my vlog about football in general and Burnley FC in particular. A vlog that this week watched Lee Carsley set out an England team that was going to fail and then said in the press conference that he didn't want the job anyway. Personally, I'd have just sent an email. Anyway, speaking of the England job, Thomas Tuchel has now been officially appointed the new England manager, replacing Gareth Southgate, who quit after the World Cup. And this has produce the normal reaction, which was exactly as you would expect. Now, what this vlog is about is not particularly about Burnley. I'll say that from the start. This is about something that's been kind of, fully enough, I kind of planned it earlier this week when I read a particular article, and then it's just been reinforced by the news of Tuchel, and to be honest, the reaction to the news of Tuchel. Now, I don't really care about the England team. I never really have. There's, I'm from the north. There's a survey that says that the further away you are from London, the less you care about the England team. And a large reason for that is they always play at Wembley. You never get to see them play. You never get a chance to go watch England play because, it's such a schlep down there. I've never really cared about England outside of tournaments. Obviously, I want England to win and all that kind of stuff. I like the current England side. I like the Euros, the World Cup. So I don't particularly care about, who the manager is or anything like that, but I want them to do a good job. And Thomas Tuchel, is just the new manager as far as I'm concerned. Now, he is obviously a German. He is following the footsteps of previous foreign managers, such as Sven-Göran Eriksson of Sweden, Fabio Capello of Italy, and Steve McLaren of the Netherlands. But yeah, the reaction has been depressingly familiar, depressingly expected. And basically, you've got the full-on Brexit racism. Let's put it that way. It's xenophobia. It's, it's people claiming to be, we can't have a German England managing the England team because we won the war. Yeah, we won the war 80 years ago. The people writing this weren't alive during the war. Ultimately, these people think the war was something that they watched on television screens in the 60s and 70s. They think the war was where Eagles dare and Kelly's heroes. I've spoken previously about, the war and the attitude to the war in football media and all that kind of stuff when I did the vlog about Burnley against that lot on Remembrance Day. And, this is just another way of using the war as an excuse to just be a xenophobe. It's xenophobia, it's not racism, but it is xenophobia. Jeff Powell of the Daily Hill said, England must be English down to the kit man. We don't need Thomas Tuchel. We need a patriot who will put this country first, second and third. That's Jeff Powell, writing in a newspaper owned by a man who was born in this country but is not domiciled here for tax purposes and has a lot of offshore investments to avoid paying tax. So when it comes to patriotism, Thomas Tuchel might well get a paycheck and he'll pay some tax on it, and he'll pay a hell of a lot more than Jeff Powell's boss will. And that tax money goes to schools and hospitals and roads. So who is actually more patriotic? But anyway, we've had the usual questions around why couldn't we have an English manager? Were there not suitable English managers out there? The answer is yeah, there are actually. There's, put your names in the hat. Eddie Howe, Sean Dyche, Graham Potter, even someone like Steve Cooper. There are English managers out there who are more than capable of doing a good job for England. But there was no talk about these managers, or no serious talk about these managers taking the England job. The interesting thing about the fact that these managers were not looking or actively linked with getting the England job was not answering the question, why do they not want it, or why do they not go for it? The interesting thing is the answer. And this comes to the second thing I wanted to talk about this week, which is connected to the England manager job, so bear with me. There was an article in The Guardian earlier this week about the promoted clubs and the commitment to good passing football. Now, we had all this last year with Kompany, sticking to his principles, naive and pragmatic, insert your cliche here. I talked a little bit about philosophy versus results in one of the previous videos. This isn't about whether it's a good philosophy or a bad philosophy, but basically the analysis, which I'm not having to go at the writer for. The analysis was put together very well. The analysis was, whether clubs should stick to their principles and thing that got them promoted in order to stay in the Premier League. And the reason these two things tie together is not the question of where are all the England managers, or the question of should a promoted club stick to its principles to stay in the Premier League. Those are the questions that get asked. The reason the questions get asked is because nobody in the media or football wants to look at the answers. Why do English managers not want to manage the England job? The England job is no longer the pinnacle of management within English football and hasn't been for 20 years. Premier League managers don't want the national job. Southgate wasn't even a Premier League manager at the time when he got appointed. Premier League manager like Eddie Howe, he's not said a single word about getting the England job, or Sean Dyche, or Graham Potter, or anything like that. They've not said a word because ultimately the answer to the question is they don't want it. And why do they not want the job? Because of a toxic media. Because the Premier League is where the action is. The Premier League has eclipsed English national football. But those are answers that the Premier League and the media don't want answering. They don't want you to turn around and say, why would Eddie Howe not want the job? Why would Sean Dyche not want the job? Because of the people in the media, the toxic writers who have some kind of weird fetishization for what England is as a football nation and as a country, as to what they think it is. People like Jeff Powell. If I had to go and deal with Jeff Powell on a civil basis, I wouldn't want that job either, because I'd turn around and say, you work for an offshore tax exile who promotes xenophobia and racism and hatred and Islamophobia and a whole bunch of other stuff. Why would I listen to someone like Jeff Powell? But that's an answer that they don't want to hear. And the answer to the question, should a newly promoted side cast aside its footballing principles in order to stay in the Premier League? And the answer is another question, which is, why should they have to? If you think about it, how do you get out of the Championship? You work to a smallish budget. Okay, Burnley have a good budget compared to the rest, but not a brilliant budget. But you work to a budget, you recruit well, you get a successful style of playing, you are able to go through the slog of the competitiveness that is the Championship for 46 games, and then you are told to throw that in the bin. Why? Because the Premier League is built to stop you being successful. The Premier League is built to make you think that doing those things, building a good team, playing to a budget, is not actually the way to be. And that's an awkward answer for the Premier League. Because surely, if you are a good manager like Vincent Kompany was, and Russell Martin, and Daniel Farke, and others, Steve Cooper, who got Forest out of the Championship, or Marcelo Bielsa, he's God among managers, and all that kind of stuff. They were good enough to get out of the Championship, but for some reason could not be good enough to stay above 17th. And that's their fault? That's an awkward answer, really, and this is the problem. The media and the Premier League ask these questions, but they don't want to know the answers. Why do England managers or English managers not want the England job? Because of a toxic media and because it's less important and a step down than being a Premier League manager. There is your answer. Should promoted clubs throw away everything that has made them successful in order to stay in the Premier League and get to 17th? No. And why do you think they should? And this is the point of this one. Don't take what the media are and the Premier League and football men, solid football men, are telling you are the questions. The trick to the world these days is to not look at the questions that are being asked. The trick is look at either the answers that are not being given or the questions that are not being asked. And when I talk about solid football men, by the way, and people in the media, when I talk about Jeff Powell, who is a xenophobe and a horrible writer and all that kind of thing. But also, there are other pundits as well. Graham Souness this week was on TalkSport, and he said that Arsene Wenger was not a real football man. Arsene Wenger, who took Arsenal and turned them from an also-ran to a perennial Premier League winner, good in Europe, didn't go over the final hurdle in Europe, but that's just sometimes a knockout competition, who turned Arsenal into a powerhouse of English football, is not a real football man, according to Graham Souness. I mean, really? Either Graham Souness is really, really stupid, or he's pretending to be stupid in order to get your engagement and your clicks. And I'm not entirely sure what's the better answer there. I'm not entirely sure whether being stupid or pretending to be stupid is a good look either way. I'm not sure that writing xenophobic horribleness in a racist newspaper is something we should be listening to or reading. I know it gets shoved down our throats, but it should be something we're not even going to react to. One of these things about why I enjoy doing these vlogs is kind of to point these things out, is to kind of like work this stuff out for myself. I don't go down the usual sort of vlog route, and part of it is sort of asking the question, why are we listening to these people? Why is it that you and I seem to understand modern football more than people whose job it is to write about football and just get it so very, very wrong on a daily basis? When we're listening to pundits on the radio or on the television talking about Burnley Football Club and just coming out with cliche and things that are wrong. Company is too naive, he's too pragmatic. He was too naive and too pragmatic to stand in the Premier League. That's why he got approached to go to Bayern Munich. What does that say? What does that say about the people who are telling you this, as opposed to the people at Bayern Munich? I'm not saying Company is the greatest manager ever. I'm not saying he's a terrible manager. What I'm saying is people who work in football and whose livelihoods depend on it at Bayern Munich decided they would go with Vincent Kompany. And yeah, 8th choice and all that kind of thing. But they decided he was suitable. And they're, first or second in the Bundesliga right now. But he wasn't good enough. His footballing principles weren't good enough. Hang on a second. He's at Bayern Munich. He's in the Champions League. Scoring, 9 goals the other week. Yeah, you were told he's not good enough. We're told English managers should be going for the English job. Yeah, I agree. Why aren't they? We're told clubs should ditch their footballing principles that made them successful. Why? That's it for this week. There are no answers to that, by the way. There are no right or wrong. What I want to do is just basically get it off my chest that so much noise about football in this country, so much noise about football in the media and all that kind of stuff is just plain, when it's not wrong, it's nasty. And we've had 2 examples there. The wrongness of sticking to your principles and the nastiness around Thomas Tuchel. Thomas Tuchel is not by all accounts, he's not a particularly pleasant guy to work for. He might be a very pleasant guy away from football. He probably is, but in terms of nastiness, he's got nothing, absolutely nothing, on the tabloid media.